Hello, and welcome to Improbable Things. I'm J. Grace Pennington, and this is my podcast where I share 6 improbable thoughts before breakfast, which is 6 thoughts about reading or writing. So I am ready to get started. So thank you all for listening, and let's dive in. Number 1, a couple of days ago, I finished marking up the manuscript for Firmament Eleftheria with changes that need to be made. And so I sat down a couple days ago, right after I finished that, and started work on the actual rewrites. And honestly, I think this may be my favorite stage of writing a book and getting it out there, because it just tends to flow pretty easily for the most part. I think I've mentioned this before, but so what I do, so the manuscript gets completely printed out, gets marked over with a red pencil, and then I open up a completely new document, just take the binder with the manuscript in it and start typing out from scratch. Like, I don't go into a document that's already written and make changes. I just start all over from the beginning. But of course, a lot of it goes really fast because a lot of it is just word for word the same. And I'm a fast typist. I type about 95 words per minute, I think. But then it just helps me it's easier for me to really make sure I'm looking at every single thing. I'm not skimming over anything because I'm typing it all out fresh. And it helps me see where I need to make the small changes. And it also helps me, if I need to rearrange things, it's less confusing to do it that way. Or if I need to, make somewhat bigger changes to the plot, it's just easier for me to do it that way than to go into something that's already there and be cutting it up and putting new pieces together and sticking something else in there where I might have forgotten something that came earlier. Instead, if I'm just typing it all out new, then I can get a better picture of it, I feel like. So anyway, all that to say, it goes pretty smoothly. I feel like a lot of it is just sort of retyping with small tweaks, and I also feel like I'm really getting to polish it. And so I really like that. I haven't done too much so far. I think I'm almost done with the first chapter, but I'm enjoying it and hoping that the rest of the process will go smoothly. I'm going to try to speed through this so we can really get this publication ball rolling. And number 2, one of the things I'm trying to do most in this draft, and I mentioned a little bit last week how sort of atmosphere and ambience is something I struggle with in my writing. And one way I try to fix that is to add in small sensory details, because I just tend to skim over that stuff in my first draft. But I feel and I hope that when I add those things in, it's a way that can sort of help anchor the reader into that scene and into that place, so it doesn't feel so, disembodied. So as an example, there was a scene that I was just rewriting where Andy and the doctor and some other people are in a meeting in this briefing room, and Andy gets to the room and the doctor is already there, and he kind of doesn't want to be there, and he's sort of frustrated, and so he's drumming his fingers on the table. And I had said in the first draft that he was drumming his fingers on the table, but then when I came back around, so I'm always looking for places to add in things that, like I said, can sort of tether you into the moment and into the setting. And so I try to think, okay, well, what sound is it making as he's tapping his fingers? So, and then that also forces me to make sure I know what the table is made of, and just so that informs what sound it makes, how loud it is in the room, stuff like that. So I try to do a lot of those sorts of things, just small details, but I think more important than I tend to realize. And so I have to be very intentional about that. But those are kind of fun things. I feel like it's kind of fun to stop and think about that and think, okay, what is she hearing, smelling, and just maybe small details that she's seeing that I didn't put in before, things like that. So yeah, that's been fun, and I'm hoping to do a lot more of that as I finish up these rewrites. Number 3, this is just a funny little tidbit. I've talked a lot about my daughter Violet and how she loves to spell things and write and draw and whatever. And so we started doing some little preschool workbooks with her, and so I gave her a pencil, and she has colored pencils, but this was the first time I'd given her like, an official like number 2 pencil with an eraser, all that. And I told her like, okay, this is like a special pencil for school, and keep it in your pencil box. And she started doing this, and here's what's funny is that the bigger she gets, the more I'm flashing back to my own childhood, and sometimes even little details I've totally forgotten. So she started, once she had this pencil, she started using it just for coloring. And I'll be like, okay, you can color now. And she would take her pencil, just her regular, graphite pencil. I said, don't you want some colors? Like, don't you want red or green or blue? And she's like, no, I just want this pencil. And she would just color and color with it. And I suddenly remembered when I was like really little, I'm assuming probably about her age, going through kind of a spell where I did that. And I remember thinking that it was like really grown up to have, a real pencil like that. And I wanted to use it instead of crayons, and I would color things with the pencil. So it's just so funny, just how you can pass things on and pass tendencies on, especially. Like, she just has so many of my little quirks, but it's just been funny to watch her coloring with that pencil. So yes, she still asks me to spell things all the time. Sometimes when we're out and about, she'll ask me how to spell something, and when I tell her, she'll ask if I can show her later how to write it on some paper. So it's really sweet. Number 4, I mentioned last week that I was going to be going to my writers group for the first time in a really long time. And so I did go, and it was really wonderful. I'm so glad that I went, and definitely looking forward to going again. It was a pretty small group, but it was people that really close to and have known for a long time, and it was just really special. And just getting to be there and share some of my work, and also I almost forgot just how inspiring it is as a writer to be there, because I mentioned they're all so talented, and just hearing everyone else's work really makes me like, every time I drive home from there, I'm like, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna write all this stuff, and I'm gonna write poetry, and I'm gonna write this and that. And a lot of times I'm too tired when I get home to actually do it, but it does sort of light that spark in me again. And especially for things like poetry and short fiction, or short nonfiction, actually, more often. And those are things that I've just found, like, even though I don't take time to do anymore. And so I would love to find a balanced way that I can kind of work those back into my writing. Even though if I want to do novels, I need to put a lot of my focus into that, because I don't have a lot of extra time. But poetry and, short creative nonfiction are really important to me. And it's been forever since I've written any. Like, I think I've written a couple short pieces that I use as blog posts and things like that. But for poetry, I don't even know. It's definitely been years since I wrote any poetry. And I know that it was always really good to do that and just like work out, my emotions and, things that I was going through. So it would probably be beneficial also. So we'll see. But either way, I was really glad to be there and just to hear other writers. And we also just spent a lot of time afterwards visiting, and I laughed so hard. Like, oh my goodness, I was crying laughing. So it was a huge blessing, and definitely looking forward to going back soon. Number 5, my currently reading. I'm currently reading first I reread something I read a really long time ago, and that is a book called Red Rain. Was written originally under pen name Aubrey Hanson, and I believe is now under Rachel Newhouse. And the author is just one of my really dear friends from a long time, way back. And, we were in each other's weddings and all that. And so anyway, she wrote this book, Red Rain, years and years ago, published it a little bit before I published the first firmament book, I believe. And I've always loved it, and I did the audiobook for it and did beta reading for it, so I was really familiar with it. But I had been a long time since I went back and reread it, and then she asked me, she's just now working on getting out some new books in the series, and so she wanted me to beta read for those. So I went back and read Red Rain to refresh my memory, and then there was a short story and a sequel that I had somehow never gotten around to reading, so I just read through those as well. And I had to kind of hurry so I can, work on beta reading for the next book pretty quickly. But it was so much fun to read back through Red Rain and read some, more material in the series that I hadn't read before. And I honestly forgot how good the book is. It's just really enjoyable. And we've always laughed about how many similarities we accidentally had between Red Rain and the Firmament series, especially my first Firmament book. There's just a lot, and we were writing them around the same time, but we weren't talking about them or collaborating or anything, and yet there somehow ended up kind of a lot of eerie similarities between the protagonists and their families and things that happen in the stories. It's really funny. And so definitely, if you like Firmament and have not tried Red Rain and the other books in the series, there's a short story called Project 74 and a sequel called Crook Q. And book 3, I believe, is coming out pretty soon. I'm going to be reading that one starting today. But definitely check those out. They have, they're very similar to the Firmament series in that they're about that same length, same reading level, Christian book, science fiction, young girl protagonist, and just really fun twists and turns. I really enjoyed going back through it and reading the new material, and really looking forward to more about these characters finally. And so, yeah, just wanted to recommend those and just say I've really enjoyed revisiting the characters in the series, and looking forward to more. So number 6, I just thought I would talk a little bit about. So I've been watching the TV show Angel, and I actually started it 4 years ago, but I kept stopping and starting. I think I watched the first season really fast, and then it wasn't streaming anywhere, and I had to get the second season on DVD, and then I did, but I kind of got out of the habit of watching it, and then I got rid of the DVDs, and then I found it on one streaming service, and I watched a few more, and then I just kind of forgot about it, and then I watched some more, and I got tired of it, and then I watched some. So anyway, I've just been watching it for a long time now, but I've really gotten back into it the past few weeks. And I like the show. I like the characters. Obviously, there's demons and weird, I guess, sort of spiritual stuff, even though it's not really spiritual. It's really just fictional, weird, supernatural stuff. But it's definitely dark. It's definitely worldly, the morality or lack thereof. But it is interesting. The characters are fun. There are, a lot of moral dilemmas that I always enjoy thinking through. And the main character, Angel, is incredibly tormented, which is always a huge draw for me. So anyway, I have been enjoying it, but one thing I've really noticed that I'm trying to kind of pay attention to as the writer of a series myself is just the ups and downs of a series and how hard it is to balance that. So the reason I'm watching it is because it's created by Joss Whedon, and I think he's a great storyteller. I have enjoyed a lot of his other shows, and definitely he's very creative and has a really good sense of storytelling. But I feel it's just so hard to balance a series, and I think the longer it goes, the harder it is, which is why TV shows usually go downhill toward the end. But just to balance those ups and downs for the audience, because here's what I think this is really a strong contrast in this show in particular. So Angel, just a quick summary, he's a several hundred-year-old vampire, and so vampires are evil. But he, after, killing or, turning or whatever, this gypsy's daughter, the gypsy cursed him with a soul. So now he has, a conscience and can feel the guilt of everything he's done. So he has a soul now, and now he fights other vampires and demons and saves and helps people. So anyway, but here's the problem is that, he's still a vampire, he has a dark side, and things can happen too that will actually turn him completely evil and take his soul away temporarily. I don't know, it's weird for sure. But he has his ups and downs, let's just say. And so sometimes the show will get into a thing where he's either turned evil or is on the verge of it, and he's just super brooding, and it just sort of drags it down. And you start to be oh my goodness, it's just a lot. It just gets heavy. And so it could be like that for a while, and then things get better, and whatever the problem was is fixed, and the people are, the characters are back together again, and it's the old Angel that we know and love is back with the one that has like a sense of humor and charm and all that, and it's a huge relief. But then, and I'll tend to be like, oh, thank goodness, things are back to normal, things are good, Angel is good, let's just keep it this way now. But of course, if everything was just good, then that's not a story. That's not an adventure. That's not something we really want to watch or read. Something with no conflict. And also, I find like usually the thing you really do not want to happen as a reader or a viewer is the thing that the writer really has to make happen. And so it's like just messes with your emotions. And so I think it's such a hard balance to be able to do that without overdoing it. Because if you put people through too much of the emotional roller coaster, it does just get to be just too much. Like you just can't ride on that train for too long. You eventually are going to disengage from the story if it's too much. But on the other hand, if it's too little, then you're also going to disengage because there's not enough to hold your interest. And so finding that balance, because also we want drama and conflict in stories, but we do also just want to have fun. Like we want characters that we can love. We do want to just see them enjoying themselves. We want to laugh. We want to have a sense of relief at some points in a story and in a series. And so it is hard finding that